Hi there! Fellas, is it okay to cheat on your beautiful, caring girlfriend who's pregnant with your child, and despite feeling shame, continue on your relationship with them and not have the courage to tell them that you have a beautiful, caring girlfriend? No? That's what we like to hear! Now, does that apply to our game today? Absolutely not! Welcome or welcome back, my name is Yuru, and let's get into Catherine the Classic together. Also, just a friendly reminder that if you own the game or have plans to play the game, do that and come back to this video, because it's truly an experience. Part 1, the story. It all begins with a beautiful host welcoming us to the Golden Playhouse, introducing herself as Trisha, the Midnight Venus. She lightly brushes on an ongoing rumor where if you found a dream, you die in reality as well, before also introducing our main protagonist, Vincent Brooks, age 32. It zooms in on the TV with Vincent's disassociating face. And from the get-go, you can't tell me this isn't memeable. He's snapped out of it by Catherine, his girlfriend of 5 years. She taps her fingers in accordance with her annoyance with him, and then immediately cuts to him entering a strange nightmare, where he must climb by puzzling his way up and escape to make it out alive. The next morning, we catch a glimpse of a second of his eyes being that of red sheep eyes as he awakens before checking his underpants and mattress, indicating that he had wet the bed as confirmed by a later voice line. He gets a call from work, which we learn that he works in the coding industry and is most likely a website coder/designer. We see Catherine and him in the same cafe as before called Corona Rabbit, which after a dual conversation he gets nagged by her parents' wishes to meet him, as they were pressuring her. But he just kinda tries to divert the topic from their relationship because he's not ready for a life of commitment and responsibility, such as having children, quitting drinking, and not being a broadcaster in general, so he expresses his wish for things to stay the same between them, and mentions that she has her career to look forwards to anyway. In the next scene, we learn that he's not the only one experiencing these dreams, and a series of deaths have already occurred, called the Death of Lonely Men as seen on the news in Stray Sheep, which is a bar he frequently visits with his friends, Johnny, his childhood friend, and Toby, Johnny's apprentice. This time they leave early, so Vincent gets drunk all by himself, which then a blonde young woman wearing lingerie asks to sit next to him. Afterwards, another nightmare occurs. Once he gets to the resting designation before moving on to the next stage, a sheep with a tie welcomes us, relieved that we made it through, and shaken up by everything that's been going on, exclaims, "A sheep?" The sheep, surprised by what Vincent had called him, explains that in his eyes, the others along with Vincent were the sheep, so that would make them all human. But he also can't explain whatever the hell was going on, as they hadn't a clue. But he had a hunch that there might be an exit at the very summit of the towers, so they shouldn't give up and try their best. A single confessional stands in the middle of the rest area, where a boyish, almost childlike voice reaches to us, explaining that this is the world of nightmares and that before they are killed one by one, he wants to determine their life's worth by asking moral questions about relationships, which also determine the course of the story. However, the conversation is cut short, ending with him saying that someone he knew had wanted him there and dead. Near the end of the night, aka the last stage, we see a giant nightmare-inducing version of Catherine holding a bloody knife as she chases down Vincent. Thankfully, he escapes, but when we wake up the next day, the young woman, also known as Catherine, is right next to us in bed. Good going, Vincent. God damn it. And look at that. Literal masterpiece. Mwah. It then cuts to a flashback of them at the bar. She agrees that marriage is something that ties down someone, and that it's better to live freely. She drunkenly falls on him, then moves his hand toward her hips. They share a kiss and, well, we know the rest. And so the dilemma begins. Will Vincent choose to be with a younger woman or his girlfriend of 5 years? Also, for the sake of confusion, I'll be calling the blonde woman as Catherine and the other as Caserin. So we learn that men who are unfaithful partake in these dreams. And as we just saw, at the end of each night, they are chased down by their worst nightmares, which differentiates from person to person, that also changes each night. Anyway, she tells him that she doesn't just do this with everyone and that he's special, but he fumbles his words and says that this was his first time and that he screwed up. She thinks that he was implying that it was love at first sight, but before he can explain himself, she runs off saying that she had a dentist appointment waiting. And the scene ends with Vincent telling himself that it was merely a mistake over and over again. This is where we're introduced to Orlando, another childhood friend. But because we have a character dedicated part, we'll just say that he tells Vincent to not worry, and that it's all good as long as Casarin doesn't find out. Once they're back at the Stray Sheep, Erica, their waitress friend, comments on the woman's wrath rumor as it's set to target men who cheat and kill them. She also explains that a rumor for the reason why the boss wore glasses indoors is that he used to be quite the womanizer in his youth, and got injured by his lover when he was found out to be cheating. Erica, surprised by his fearful reaction, questions his relations, and they all collectively tell him that he's the worst of the worst, and honestly deserved. He wakes up to Catherine again the next day, but Vincent doesn't realize this, so he calls out Catherine, which surprises her, because he hasn't called her by her name before. Vincent, visibly confused by this, realizes that her name is also Catherine, but you already knew that. Though in-game this is where we learned her name, so... Vincent comments on how he's jealous of her free lifestyle. She laughs at this remark and reassures him that it's okay to let loose just as long as he doesn't cheat on her. And once again, he's swayed by her, unable to resolve anything. When he meets up with Kasarin, he's seen to be wearing the same glasses as the boss. That won't protect you. She takes them off by force because he looks absolutely ridiculous, then proceeds to tell him that she's most likely pregnant. Kasarin snaps at him to at least say something, so he assures her that he's happy at this news. To which he gets a call from Catherine! Girl, fuck Vincent, but even I'm starting to feel the tension. He tries faking that he got a call from a customer, so he manages to save himself. But alas, we hear Catherine's voice as she enters the cafe to be seated in the smoking area, which is where Vincent's at. And once again, he makes an excuse and rushes to the bathroom to escape. The next scene is pretty uneventful with Vincent drinking and smoking to ease his worries. On the next day, Catherine asks what he wanted to talk about as he had called for her. He questions why he isn't able to remember anything related to her, like the significant parts are somehow missing from the picture. But she giggles to herself, saying she remembers everything, until she finds a long hair strand on the bed. To which he shrugs it off, saying that he was growing out his chest hair. Very manly indeed. She goes on a tangent that she would die if there was another woman, asking him which would be better, for her to die or be killed by her. Then gives him 5 seconds to answer. She bites into his shoulder, to which he screams, then quickly manages to calm her down. We see a single ant moving towards the door, which then the bell rings. The door gets unlocked, which is when Vincent realizes that it's Kasarin. He rushes to the door, explaining to Catherine that it's the landlady, because he couldn't afford last month's rent. She then goes to the bathroom, and Vincent finally opens the door as she's screaming at him. He tells her to keep it down since a colleague is present and forcibly yanks her out along with him. She gives him cake, explaining that she was worried about him since he was looking down for the past few days, and confirms her pregnancy before heading off. On the following morning, Vincent wakes up to a call. The unknown caller asks if he's Vincent, and when he confirms, he tells him that he's Catherine's boyfriend, which he immediately hangs up. But the guy persists and calls him again to tell him that he knows where he lives. So Vincent apologizes and promises to break off things with her. Afterwards, he feels uneasy, like someone is watching him, which he goes to the door to check and sees an eye through the peephole. Creeped out by this, he uses his bandage to cover it up. After meeting up with Catherine at the bar, she's taken aback with his questioning and denies ever knowing someone like that. They argue a bit, and out of frustration, she blurts out, "Maybe it's another Catherine you know," to which surprises Vincent, as he didn't even think of it like that, which causes him to zone out, reassuring himself that Kasarin wouldn't cheat, and neither can he trust the girl in front of him. She snaps him out of it, mentioning that he can be a real pain to be around, as he's constantly zoning out. She gets up to go back to his house. Vincent panics and tells her that he had really bad diarrhea, so they part ways. But surprise, surprise, she's right there! Why? Anyways, there's a swarm of ants crawling on both of them. Catherine screams, then realizes that they were going after the cake. But as she takes the cake box, the ants climb her legs, so she hurriedly throws the blanket, which were covered in ants, out the window. He questions why she's here, but she merely shoves the box in his face, asking who gave it to him. He voices that he has a sweet tooth and asks again, "So, when'd you get here?" Apparently, he called her, saying that he was feeling much better. Unsurprised by this, Vincent distances her from himself, and when he says that he doesn't have any time for her, she proceeds to scream, a tantrum that she simply had to see the horror movie which the screening was ending this week, forcing him to officiate their first date. In the next scene, Vincent can be seen pressing Kasarin further whether she knew someone named Steve or not. Like he had the right to question her. Taken aback by his worrisome reaction, thinks hard and confirms, but it turns out to be her friend's newborn son. She grows impatient and pressures him to speak up about what the hell was going on. He explains that there was an asshole in his company who had told him that he knew Kasarin. She doesn't say much and asks if he's doing okay, as he's been acting weird lately. He brushes it off by saying that the reason behind all of this was that there were things that he didn't understand, like the future for example. Kasarin rubs her hands together, asking in a pained voice what he didn't understand. He tries to explain that he wasn't talking about her, but his new job. She silently drinks her coffee before telling him that she had been getting creepy mails, but then immediately tells him to forget she ever said anything, and later asks if he's hiding anything from her. He assures her that nothing's going on, but again, she just stays silent before getting up to leave, saying that she had work to do. Since Kasarin insisted that she had no idea who the Steve guy was, Vincent decides to call him. After inquiring him a bit, his Catherine was a black woman, so Vincent kindly tells him that he has the wrong guy. He breaks down, screaming that he was divorcing his wife for her, and that something was coming for him. So what was going on, since he had heard Vincent's name from her mouth directly? But Vincent hangs up on him because of his crazed attitude. Back at the bar, the guys mentioned that they too had been seeing weird dreams, but somehow they could never remember it in the morning. Though they quickly dropped the topic and asked Vincent what he was going to do. And he explains that the nightmares made him realize that he took his relationship for granted, finally remembering who he held so dear. He then continues, and I have to reiterate this, but I can't betray the person who's been with me all this time. Girl, you already dead! I genuinely hate people who think they can get away with this type of behavior by apologizing. On the 7th night, right after reaching the door at the end of the nightmare, we see Steve. And I would just like to point out that he's a dentist, as it's gonna make sense in a bit. He also recognizes us, then laughs hysterically saying that he had been cursed by Catherine, before ultimately getting eaten alive by the monster. After a tiresome conversation with Orlando, we hear the news broadcast. Local dentist Steve Delholm found dead, which is when he finally remembers what had been happening. Vincent goes on a panic tangent about how he had died in his dreams, before Orlando states that he sounds like an insane person. Annoyed with all this betrayal talk, he tells him to cut it off, disclosing that he was the one that got betrayed. Vincent apologizes, and before they make their way to the bar, he declares that once all is settled, he will propose to Catherine. So he calls over Catherine to once and for all end it. He firmly explains everything, but Catherine, unfazed, truthfully asks him to keep two-timing them, since she doesn't mind as long as she's his first priority. But Vincent doesn't change his mind, so she starts crying and takes off to the bathroom. He follows her, apologizing all the meanwhile not taking his words back. So Catherine becomes furious and starts violently punching him. I love this scene so much. It's like she suddenly gained the player's collective feelings for his messes. I already feel super fulfilled just by hearing his cries of pain. Lovely, give me 10 more. Afterwards, Orlando, Toby, and Erica try to cheer him up, but he admits that he had deserved it. On day 8, Vincent wakes up only to see Catherine, but as we quickly see, it was just an hallucination. He sighs in relief and mentions that he hadn't felt this rested in a while, as he didn't have a nightmare that night. Overjoyed by this fact, he falls asleep with a smile on his face. After some time passes, Catherine comes for a visit, but as we open the door, Catherine magically shows up behind us. Naturally, both Catherine and Vincent freak out, while Catherine offers to make them a cup of coffee. So Catherine and Vincent are forced to talk about the circumstance. And this whole scene is just so awkward to watch. Catherine is behind them humming as she makes coffee, the other Catherine is screaming at him, and Vincent just trying to save his ass. You can feel the secondhand embarrassment radiating through the screen. Anyhow, Catherine questions how he could betray her like that after she had told him about her pregnancy. Vincent, who can't even look her in the eyes, fidgets around and denies about Catherine. Then Catherine comes over with the coffee. She tries to shove it in Catherine's face, saying that she brought 2 sugar cubes for him just the way he likes it, further declaring that he belongs to her, and that Catherine is merely an extra baggage for him, and so this was the perfect time to break up with her. Vincent denies ever having said anything like that, but both Catherines start arguing with each other. Vincent, unable to say much, begs for her forgiveness, which she of course gets even more enraged by. We then get a montage of Vincent holding his head and screaming, while the Catherines continue to argue. It then cuts to Catherine getting up with blank eyes and searching for a knife in the sink. To which Catherine cunningly replies with, "What's the matter? Looking for this?" And just pulls out a knife. She blames Catherine for everything and attacks her. Vincent rushes over and protects Catherine by taking a blow to his stomach. Catherine tries attacking her again, but before she can land the final blow, Catherine gets a hold of the knife and pierces right through her stomach, killing her in the process. Blood gushes out all over the floor, and Catherine reasonably screams, losing her mind. Vincent, while trying his best to control the situation at hand, smacks her in the face, saying that he would fix everything. So he orders her to go home, and while assisting her to the door, they're only met with the same tower in the nightmares. The room disappears from sight, which then the battle starts as they both must make it out alive while a monstrous Catherine tries to kill them. Once they make it to the door, Vincent reaches his hands out for her, exclaiming how they can go back now, which causes Catherine to crash out, as she can't think of a future with him after all this. He tries to reassure her that he was just confused, but Catherine just replies with how she can't trust him anymore. And as the monster approaches them, a rumbling occurs, so she falls, and without much thought, she accepts her fate as she slowly closes her eyes. But Vincent throws himself to protect her, then embraces her while saying how he can't lose her like this. She calls out his name with dead eyes, though in the English translation she is cut off before asking him something, and in the JP version she just says his name. So I don't know. And the scene ends just like that before he wakes up in a panic state and sees Catherine asking if he's okay, which makes all that mean nothing as it was just a dream. Unable to comprehend this, he freaks out while calling out for Catherine, which is when Catherine understands that he had been cheating. Literally all he had to do was shut up, but no, we needed more drama apparently. He hugs her in relief, happily expressing how much he means to her, that he would protect her, and then correcting himself to both of them, aka the baby. But she cuts him off to explain that as it turns out, she wasn't pregnant, thus wanted to break up. And this is when reality finally hits Vincent. Taken aback by her reaction, he thinks to himself, and I'm gonna quote this as is, "Hold on, I dumped Catherine and was ready to get married. What more could I possibly do?" Well, guess what, Vincent? Reality doesn't work that way! Get you sorry-ass bitch! Words cannot express how happy I am that she didn't settle down with him. She then leaves without elaborating like a girl boss. Love her for that. Vincent mops around, all depressed, while continuously trying to reach Casarin, but to no avail, so he decides to go out, aimlessly walking through the city as rain pours down. He eventually gets a call thinking that it's Casarin, so he enthusiastically picks it up, only to be disappointed that it was a call from work. Afterwards, Orlando and Vincent can be seen discussing the situation in the bathroom stalls, which is when Orlando asks if the other girl had texted Vincent or anything like that. When he checks his phone, he realizes that all the data about her has been wiped completely. After telling him that he'd used the info to meet up with her yesterday, Orlando asks where they had met, which also confuses Vincent since the guys were there at the bar too, watching him. But it guarantees that he hadn't seen anyone beside him. After hearing this, he loses it, considering that he was in this mess because of her. As he tries to regain his sanity, he decides to ask Erica, hoping that Orlando just wasn't paying attention. But to his dismay, Erica also hadn't seen her. They make it known to him that maybe she was just an illusion in his head, since he wasn't doing so well for the past week. Vincent passes out on the table all sad looking. The guys except Toby exchange that they might have been seeing the same nightmares, confirming the curse. Erica also mentions that she had been having nightmares, though it's unclear if she was referencing the same thing, or if women can have these dreams in the first place. Erica prompts them to call it early, seeing how tiresome and off-putting they were looking. Right after trying to consolidate Vincent a bit, she's called for by a customer. He then tries to recall the events of that night they had met in desperation, to prove that she was somehow real. Thankfully, he does notice something crucial to unraveling this mystery. The boss had come up to them that very night, so he goes for a friendly chat. He harasses the boss, even going as far as getting violent and choking him. So Erica steps in to stop him, but before things can worsen, he admits seeing her and even describing her to the T. Vincent sighs in relief, but he says something rather odd right after. Not only did you survive this long, but to think you figured me out. Vincent, clearly not in his right mind, disregards this and they even joke about it. But Thomas continues. Normal people can't see her, getting caught up in the heat of someone finally figuring things out. He tells him that it's only natural that others couldn't see her as she wasn't from this realm, confirming that he was behind these nightmares in the process. Both Erica and Vincent are surprised by this, still not fully comprehending what he had said, which is when the boss understands that he wasn't referencing his master plan. So he tries playing dumb once again, and it's back to square one with Vincent questioning while choking him. He forcibly takes off his glasses, revealing the same pair of eyes the sheep had during the dreams. He, Thomas Mudden as he's called nowadays, finally starts explaining. Because of men like Vincent who waste a woman's prime time of having children, they force the couple to separate ways as it poses a threat to the optimal population growth. And what's better than to end things with a spicy affair, as he puts it. So Catherine was a succubus all along, commanded by him to impose on hesitant men's relationships, taking on the prey's preferred characteristics as needed, to appear as their ideal woman. Upon hearing this, Vincent convinces himself that that doesn't make it cheating, which again, no, that's not how it works. But that's nothing compared to this bombshell of a news. The reason you were born was because we weeded out the man who was misleading your mother. It doesn't get better than this. What is happening? Vincent doesn't show any signs of backing down, which the boss gets annoyed by, cunningly saying that tonight's dream would be his last with a smirk on his face. But Vincent just grabs a knife and points it at him. What if you die here before I do? But before anything can happen, the guys come back to check on him only to be greeted with the sight. He convinces them that all is fine, so they just kinda nod along and go to their seats. He proposes a deal to Thomas, that if he makes it out alive, he shall grant him a wish, for him to meet up with Casarin one last time and to once and for all end everyone's dreams. And so the final area, heaven, commences. The mysterious voice reaches out again in the confessionals. They unravel their identity to us as Astaroth, then explain to us that this is a place where sinners like him are challenged, in favor of a more promising future for humanity, therefore making men fear to even think of betrayal, with the ongoing deaths that surround them. Vincent laughs it off, saying that that's so beautiful that it almost makes him want to cry. But he questions, why just men? But they don't answer back, only continuing that they had ordered Thomas to bring them the lowest of the low men for judgment. This would also make Thomas a pawn for Astaroth, despite being him a deity as well. After having survived 3 stages in a row, Thomas gets furious and decides to take matters into his own hands. Astaroth congratulates us before the battle and asks, what are you living for? But Vincent can't answer as he says, my life isn't so simple that I can boil it down that easily. Which disappoints them because they couldn't let him escape without having an answer, as they explain that this was his curse. To truly escape from here, the individual must have a definitive answer to all questions asked at the confessionals. After answering the last question to freedom, Astaroth continues, apparently Thomas was once human. He had been sent to the dreams much like Vincent, overcame all trials and tribulations and became a god named Dumizit. After surviving the first phase, Astaroth makes it known that their job is done here, since Vincent has successfully been baptized. We finally make it through the end, reaching the highest part of heaven. But just before escaping, Dumizit emerges and berates us. However, Vincent has had it with him. The last scene where he says, quote, people's lives aren't planned out for them. There's no roadmap. Hits so hard. He then continues that he's human at the end of the day, and despite not being the best he could be, he's free to choose how he wants to live. He's definitely come a long way. No longer do we see a meek, undecided Vincent, but a more refined, determined, and a truer version of him. He takes control over himself and goes through the gate once and for all, shattering Dumizit in the process. After waking up, he smiles to himself knowing that he can finally rest easy now, and heads off to the bar determinedly. Now, let's go over all the possible endings. I absolutely hate the true lover ending. Imagine cheating and then getting married like nothing ever happened. All is forgiven and everyone's happy. Yippee! You! Who in their right minds looked at the storyboard and was like, yeah, that's true happiness right there? Anyways, the guys convinced Cassidy to come to the bar without telling her that Vincent would be there, and then gaslight her into thinking that everything's gonna be okay because apparently he didn't cheat! The normal lover ending plays out the same as the true lover ending, but instead of seeing the wedding, we see them before the event, choosing who to invite, which dress to pick, etc. In the bad cheater ending, instead of accepting his bullshit logic, she turns him down and heads off without second-guessing herself like a normal person would. Absolute queen. In the true cheater ending, Vincent forces Thomas to arrange a meeting with Catherine. He explains to her that before meeting her, he felt as if his future was always decided for him. But that had changed as he finally made up his mind. He basically proposes to her, which then her father, the one overseeing all of hell, pops out of nowhere and is all like, you can't have her. But I kid you not, Catherine kicks his balls to make him shut up and becomes all tsundere-like, accepting Vincent's feelings. The next time we see them, they're in the underworld and Vincent has become a demon. He sits on top of Catherine's father, surrounded by demon women, and essentially becomes a new leader of hell as everyone just fawns over him. So the moral of the story is that you get cool demon powers if you cheat. Wait, that doesn't sound right. The normal cheater ending plays the same, but instead it ends with them in bed with Thomas next to them. Catherine explains that he was there to stalk them, and to just think of him as decoration. Girl! And the bad cheater ending is just Catherine refusing Vincent's feelings, and everything continues on like normal. The freedom endings are only obtainable through the last freedom questions, and both of them play out the same at first. Vincent completely gives up on marriage as he finally comes to terms that he isn't ready and that it's okay to feel that way. He then asks for a loan of $50,000 from the boss. Thomas tries to reason that he just opened the shop, so he didn't have the money, but he persists, promising to give it back, as he was going to invest the money. Though this investment was for the space tour, but still, since the boss didn't have the money, he gives what he can, and Vincent decides to bet it on a women's wrestling match to earn more. And he chooses to bet for a wrestler called Feather. In the normal freedom ending, Feather loses and nothing changes, but in the true freedom ending, Feather wins and Vincent gets to go to space. Also feel free to correct the endings in the comments because it was a bit confusing to understand what was going on. Part 2. The characters. Vincent is a troubled man at the prime age of 32, but we just heard the story so there's no need to repeat everything. Now, despite trying to appear mature by wearing tailored pants, and I'm assuming a designer Italian coat on top, we can see his playful character with his pink design t-shirt. And as seen in the first cutscene, Cassidy adds 2 sugar cubes to his coffee, as he seems to not be able to drink it without it, signifying his aloof character even more. On the third day, Cassidy questions if he had gotten a new phone recently, despite having bought the other phone quite recently as well. And that last month he had gotten a new computer too. So not only is he irresponsible about his relationships, but in terms of finance as well. This can also be seen whenever he returns home from the Stray Sheep, as he always puts his drinks on his tab, which we know is expensive because Cassidy specifically addresses this. Also, when inspecting the ATM at the bar, he's always saying how broke he is. He is easily swayed by others in matters that might be insignificant for some in his age range. Oh my god, that is hard to say. Age range. If we take the time to analyze his room a bit, we can clearly see a big poster for space tourism. This also signifies his strong will to live, and thus his enjoyment in life. As mentioned by Thomas too, when he was surprised to see someone managing to outlive his puzzles. The place is always messy with dirty clothes all over the floor, cigarette butts and empty cans of alcohol on the table. His carefree attitude can be seen in moments like when Kassanin asks if he was getting paid for all the overtime work he was doing for the company. He just says that it doesn't matter at the end of the day. Even his hair is unkempt. God, the character designs are so good. He questions why Catherine had chosen him. It wasn't like he was all that handsome or had money in the first place. This could indicate that he was going out with Kassarin because she was the only one that hadn't left him. And he already disliked change in his personal life. So there wouldn't be a reason for him to go out of his way to find someone more suitable for him. So rather than love, it could be interpreted as a codependent relationship. Vincent never truly grew up. But since time is inevitable, as he officially entered adulthood with a momentous career and such, he never knew how to deal with the expectations of becoming older. We can see how much this has made him dreary and tiresome, because he wasn't always like this. All throughout his adolescence, he was an optimistic child spreading hope and compassion to those around him as confirmed by Daniel, who we'll get to in a bit, and through his encouragements to those around him, leading them on in nightmares, his actual hopeful character finally shines through in the last acts. As he finally remembers who he is on the inside, it's really interesting to see how realistic his portrayal is. He's shameful, yes, but there's a kindness in his heart that you can't help but root for him to become better.
Also, I didn't know where to put this, but his mother left for another man in high school, leaving him behind, never to be seen again.
Kassanin is the total opposite of Vincent, which makes me question why she even chose to be with him. But at the same time, much like what Orlando says, assertive women sometimes tend to prefer timid men. But I would like to theorize that she stayed for the sake of stability. Because not only have they been dating for years, but considering Vincent's meek and yes-man attitude, she most likely thinks that she can change him to suit her wants. And as marriage is a form of unity, that would be the most effective way to quote-unquote fix him. She most likely also knowingly lied about being pregnant to get Vincent to submit to her wholly. But since he didn't change, she didn't even bat an eye when leaving him. Although I'm not saying this like, oh, she's so cold, but rather she's sharp and knows her boundaries, which is a good thing. And in the first cafe scene, when Vincent asks if she ever had dreams where she got killed or died, she simply answers with, "No, I usually do the killing in my dreams," signifying her dominant character, go queen! She enjoys having control and a steady life in all aspects, including private life, but she cares foremost about her career, as she says that even after having the child, she wishes to go back to the workforce, thus having no intention of being a housewife whatsoever. Her style perfectly reflects her too, modest, elegant, and sharp, all the while being stylish, which is a good touch since she works in a company that specializes in suits, called Batham Suits. Another thing is that although it's not disclosed outright, it's highly implied that Kassanin had wanted Vincent dead, as said by Asaroth. Someone he knew had wanted him there and dead. But again, we don't know how true this is, so there's that. Okay, so for both of the love interests, I like to go over the text messages, because we can see their psyche a little bit more. In the first message, we can read how she's jealous of her friends, as they all had been happily married and some even had kids. And since her parents were pressuring her in the first place, I feel like she might have been confused and gave in, which led her to see marriage as a gateway into acceptance from her peers, and as a pinnacle form of happiness as a 30-year-old woman, which is a great analogy of how women are pressured into having children as soon as possible. And I won't get into the details, but I hope you know that's a harmful mindset to have. The second message is pretty unimportant, but we can see her compassionate side a little. After scolding Vincent about going to the bar every night, and that he had to change his ways, she apologizes, saying that maybe she was being too harsh on him, as she didn't mean to be overbearing. And those were the only worthwhile ones, as others are just worrisome messages about his irresponsibleness. Catherine, while having the same name as our main lover, is the complete opposite of Kassarin, and is closer to Vincent's characteristics in some aspects, which makes sense as she's his ideal lover. She's carefree, likes to dress sexy, and is overall much more cheerful, while being almost comedically childish, throwing tantrums whenever she doesn't get what she wants, and overjoyed whenever she does. Now, as it later turns out, no one except Vincent could see her, because she was a succubus sent by Thomas Mudden to break off men who had no intention of marriage. But supposing that this game takes time around the mid-2010s is such a stupid idea. Like, we have an overpopulation problem. Thank you very much. Guess I should blame Thomas for that. This would also explain why she was panicking to get to the dentist, aka Steve. The foreshadowing is absolutely crazy. Definitely wouldn't have noticed this if I wasn't rewatching my footage. We know that she takes on a form based on her prey's preferences. Although from what we can see in the true cheater ending, her true form also possesses the same qualities as the average human female, which completely contradicts her father's form. I definitely would have loved it if they went all demon for her true form, but they can't all be winners, so it'll pass for now. Her flirtatiousness is an all-time max with the messages. And again, her childish side slips through with the usage of emojis. Unlike Kassadin's messages that don't beat around the bush and get to the point rather than playful, although most of these messages are insignificant, so we'll be skipping most of them. But she sends a lot, and I mean a lot, of spicy messages. And the replies in order to get the cheater endings are extremely cringeworthy. The secondhand embarrassment is secondhand embarrassing. This is just the Mystic Messenger Zen/JH route all over again. Also, a cute detail is that on the phone with Vincent, she yells at her dad to not skip her turn in a video game, which can also be seen in the true cheater ending. It's not really foreshadowing, but it's really cute nonetheless. Johnny is a man of few words, who doesn't like to share his personal life, and struggles with others, even to those who are close. He works diligently as a mechanic, hoping to take over the shop one day. Although Johnny has never cheated before, he can be seen within the nightmares, because he has no intention of marriage, although his reasoning is kinda sweet. We hear him explain multiple times that he wouldn't marry unless he found his soulmate, and that he was perfectly content with never marrying if he never found her. However, we do find out that he's unhappy with his current girlfriend, which surprises Toby, as he had thought that his love life was also perfect because that's how he appeared to be on the outside. But we also learned that he was in love with Kassadin the whole time, as said in a voice line in 7-1, that he felt as if he was betraying Vincent for having these feelings, which can be seen later on in both the Freedom endings. He confesses to Vincent after their breakup that he had to ask Kassadin out on a date, but it was never mutual, as he says, "I guess I'm just not good enough," suggesting that she turned him down. Also, he loves playing Rapunzel and has the highest score for it, which is an arcade puzzle game that can be played in Stray Sheep. And off topic, but I desperately need an Otome game where I can romance him. He's so fine! Orlando comes off as a funny guy, joking around whenever the conversation gets too serious. He also doesn't pay much mind to the whole cheating ordeal, as he's the only one asking if she's cute. And for Vincent to introduce her to them. Although later we learned that Orlando's wife had left him after his business failed, and presumably lost all of his money in the process. Despite him trying his best to mask his sadness, he later explains that it's become hard to go back to an empty house, and that he can still hear her cries echoing throughout it. Even after his ex-wife had contacted him, saying how she wanted to be with him once more, he thinks of this as mockery and refuses to speak, even though he's clearly unable to let go and loves her still. And in the true lover ending, they get together, which makes sense, don't get me wrong, but it's still disappointing to say the least. He shouldn't have settled with her, in my opinion. Also, he and Vincent works in the same company. Back to back, and spinning on it back to back. Toby's the most wholesome and adorable one out of the group. He joined after Johnny took him as an apprentice. The others, and especially Orlando, like to toy with him as the baby of the group. And it's really funny to see his interactions with the rest of the group. He's quite diligent, much like Johnny, as he can finally leave it to Toby without supervision. There isn't much about him other than falling head over heels for Erica, who we'll get to in a bit. But he's pretty nervous around her. And there's this line that I absolutely have to read out. After mentioning to Erica that he had bought a new car, she says, as long as the seats are in good shape. To which he replies, "I'll make sure everything's lubed up." What the f***? Can you see why he's my favorite? Can you see? Erica is another childhood friend. She's quite cheerful while still being stern at times, telling Vincent to pull it together, as well as being quite flirtatious in a playful way. We learned that she was so heartbroken one time that she straight up disappeared, without a word, for an extended period of time, before finally coming back like nothing ever happened. Another thing which I found to be quite funny was that she was the one who spread the rumor of the witch that kills men. And for some reason, in-game people were speculating that she was the actual witch, which makes no sense! And Toby and Erica do actually become lovers in the true lover ending. But I would also like to point out that in the very same ending, we learned that she was called Eric back in high school. Orlando and Vincent also joke about her womanhood and femininity throughout the game, saying she's not actually one. Toby also sulks and asks for his V-card back. So, although it's not explicitly said, she's definitely trans. But that's just a theory! A Catherine theory! But this doesn't make it less transphobic, so I'm gonna pretend like that never happened.
Orlando and Vincent for joking in the first place.
Also in the last scene, when Vincent makes a deal with Thomas, she blushes and says, "There he goes again, acting all cool." Girl, are we seeing the same man? What do all these women see in this man? I'm actually going crazy. Also, you're going out with Toby, you bitch! Todd comes off as a weird sexist uncle, always encouraging and supporting Archie to become a better man. And I'm air quoting this because although he pities his unsuspecting and loving wife, he cheats on her with multiple women. And he does love her, but he believes that a man's worth is as good as their thing is standing high. Only through surrounding yourself with women and cheating can someone become a true man, which can be explained later, as it becomes apparent that he was following in his late father's steps. He was heavily abused by him during childhood, and deemed unworthy by him, he was always called a maggot or little Heck, even that stopped one day, making him completely invisible to his father. And even though he knows he was a bad father, he can't help but feel worthless, which is completely understandable. Archie comes off as pretty crude at first, cursing at the world at any given moment. And he hates women too. Great. On our first alone meeting, he admits to being a terrible person, as he sleeps around with women then takes off with their money, leaving them in the dark as he was disgusted by the sight of women. After Vincent chooses the option to say that he would stay with his girlfriend even if a dream girl appeared, Archie states that a happy family is just an illusion. And even mothers and sons were just men and women at the end of the day. Which is both disgusting and disturbing to hear at first, until later when Archie and Todd can be seen together on 7-2. Todd advises him to share what he was facing each night, as that would make them more determined than ever to climb. But Archie stays silent a bit, and explains that it was his mother, who loved him, not as a mom but as a woman, sexually abusing him all throughout his childhood. I don't even know what to say. That went from 1 to 100 real quick. He was even locked up in a cellar for years, only having her near him, so he ran away. And the thought of someone who should have loved him as a son doing something as horrid as that made him disgusted by the sight of women, forever reminding him of that time. But Todd becomes angry, questioning why he didn't say anything earlier, that he could have protected him, which confuses Archie. Todd then continues that Archie had actually wanted to forgive her deep down. At a later point, Todd explains that he too understands his pains to an extent, since his father had also treated him like trash, physically abusing him whenever he could. In the last encounter at the bar, Archie happily announces that he was thinking of starting a family, as he realizes that he just wanted to love someone and to be loved back. Which then Todd also says that he would start over with his wife again, explaining that he can finally come out of his father's shadow. Archie, still feeling guilty, admits to sleeping with his wife. But Todd was having none of that, and assures him that everyone has the right to restart. This really was the best possible outcome. Honestly, this is why I love Todd. He's like a kind dad to Archie when he needed it most. They also work in the same company as Cassidy, which I thought was a nice detail. Daniel is an orphan that was adopted into a wealthy family. His family was always harsh on him, putting a burden that he must live up to their standards, even going as far as giving in to marrying someone that was chosen by them. He and Vincent went to the same grade school, and yes, that's important, because all this time he was trying to one-up him. So in their first meeting, he declares his victory over him, as he had become the heir of a successful business, coming off as pushy and self-assured, still stuck in the past when he was a quiet and shy kid, following Vincent and looking up to him. But seeing how Vincent didn't even remember him, he becomes distraught, and as it turns out, this demeanor was but a mask, because even though Anna has also come to accept that in the end, he'll end up marrying another woman, and will go to sleep in her bed every night during their relationship. Her loving and kind nature couldn't let go of him, making her study etiquette and comics every night and day, saving up to buy designer clothes and handbags just so he wouldn't embarrass him whenever they were outside. Which, as you can imagine, only brought misery for both of them. In our next meeting, he explains to Vincent that he couldn't understand why he was feeling so powerless, even though he had finally become a leader, could change any market with a nod, and had powerful friends in the government. So in an attempt to cheer him up, He jokingly comments that he couldn't remember how many times he had asked Erica to cover for his tab, and was gaining a large sum of debt because of this. Seeing how sincere Vincent was, he slowly starts changing his tone, bringing up that Anna was the only thing that he had chosen for himself. But in the end, he would be forced to marry his current fiancée. When we ask Anna if that was really what they wanted, she tells us that they were past the age of believing that everything will be alright just because they have love. He also voices that he just wanted a normal life, to have freedom that others had. However, after multiple nights of Vincent telling him to not give up, he understands who the sheep was, telling him that he would once again follow in his footsteps and take back control in his life. After that night, he tells us that he was going to throw away everything just to marry Anna, and that they were running away together tonight. He thanks us one last time and unwillingly admits to looking up to Vincent. Justin is an ex-journalist that was once well known among his peers, but all that ended when he interviewed a young talented ballerina that after her family was killed ended up taking her life as a cause of the bullying and harassment that she and her family got after the interview. He voices that despite the side note, thanking him and telling him to not blame himself for what had happened, deep down he still wishes for some sort of punishment, refusing the one last kindness she has given him. So he drowns in self-hatred and guilt towards what had happened, and believes that his hands have become bloodied. And because of this, he doesn't want to drag his lover into this mess, as he believes that marriage is two people becoming one, and thus sharing everything. This has also led him to believe that love is something like a drug, as feelings decline over time and you become numb to it, since there was no punishment to atone himself, and he was only receiving compassion and sympathy from those around, which made him disappointed and numb, unable to completely process his feelings and let go. But because of Vincent's continuous encouragements to carry on living, he finally remembers the power that words have to save someone. All this time, he was afraid that something like that would occur again, but he's finally able to overcome this. Even asking if Vincent was okay with interviewing him, the unnamed hero as he calls him. Lastly, he tells us that he has decided to tie the knot with his girlfriend. Morgan's a cop searching for the killer of his late wife, Sophie. He says that he has killed his wife early on because he thinks of himself as trash, craving death as he blames himself for her death. His only purpose in life is to find the perpetrator, unalive them with their own hands, and then himself, putting an end to his misery once and for all. He loved his wife so much that even after 6 years, he couldn't forget her, going as far as finding women who resemble her in the slightest irresistible, making him woman-crazed, which would explain the reason why he was in their nightmares in the first place. He finally comes to terms with his grief, accept the kindness and the choice to live that Vincent had taught him. But he still wouldn't give up on finding the killer, though instead he would make him atone for it instead of killing them, and carry on the love he has for his late wife in a more positive light. Instead of letting hatred and grief take over him and making him turn a blind eye to life, he thanks us one last time and leaves shortly after. Lindsay and Martha are the only ones that the player doesn't really know much about, as they only give insights about the other characters. They're still quite enjoyable to talk to though. They definitely have that wise old woman image. Thomas Madden, as said in Catherine's part, plays a major role in the story as he's the supporting mastermind behind the Cursed Dreams. And I'd like to start off by saying that despite the English VA doing a fantastic job, the JP version is by far the better portrayal, because his way of talking is much more cheerful and entertaining, which accentuates his mask of naivety. I mean, just listen to this.
Talented, brilliant, incredible, amazing, show-stopping.
Also, he does talk about his 30s and such, so either he can age and change bodies every time the host dies, or he's just outright lying to our face since we know that he has existed for eons, or he's had this body since before becoming a deity. And if we consider the first to be canon, then his life is pretty funny to be honest, as he talks about being a womanizer in his youth and even losing himself while drinking, blacking out completely multiple times. But other than that, I don't think there's anything else worth mentioning. As funny as it can get, the characters are still very relevant to how relationships can be in reality. None of them are reliable storytellers. They twist and turns their words, both opposed and in accordance to their morals in different situations, which I feel like we don't see a lot in JRPGs. And yeah, it did take a turn of trying to defeat God like every other JRPG, but the characters make up for this. Part 3, the stages. So since I did have to look at guides for most of the stages, I'm not gonna act like I know what I'm talking about, so let's speed on through these with a tier list. Stage 1 is an immediate C tier, because it's the explanatory stage. It does its job and that's it. 2-1 is pretty much the same, with nothing new to run home about, so also it's C tier. 2-2 is where we're told about item usages and coins. It's a bit more difficult, but nothing too frustrating, so B tier at best. 2-3 is our first boss stage and it's Kassadin. It does a wonderful job at being quite easy yet challenging. It's fast paced as you have to think twice as fast as the normal stages. She has 2 attack patterns, changing blocks to either unmovable ones or crumbling ones, and a normal attack with the knife she carries. Though it's nothing groundbreaking, so also a B tier. 31 is where we're introduced to the spike blocks that one-shot you. And considering the slight input lag I was having, this drove me insane as you can imagine. But nonetheless, it works really good as an added challenge, so we'll put it onto B tier as well. 32 plays about the same as the last stage but feels much more dynamic, as it's no longer an intro for the mechanics. So an A tier for that. 33 is a manifestation of how Vincent views Catherine as a sinful tempter. Since its name is Immoral Beast, it has 2 attacks, one where it shoots love bombs that if it comes into contact with you, all your inputs are reversed, but the attack isn't too hard to judge as it just requires patience. And the other is a tongue attack that one-shots you as well. However, the puzzles are a bit more difficult, especially since you have no time to wait and think properly. Also, I hate looking at this thing, C tier. 4-1 is just about using the Inazuma technique, which loses its spark quickly after doing it a few times. You basically just mindlessly move blocks and the game forces you to play how it wants you to, therefore not allowing for any creativity nor any other routes. So a D tier at best if we're being generous. 4-2 is unexpectedly a boss stage, and as it occurs right after Kassadin's pregnancy announcement, it's a monstrous baby. The attack pattern is just an upwards blow to make you fall down, which of course insta-kills you on hit. It is by far one of the most annoying attacks. The only saving grace of this stage is the platforming, which is surprisingly really fun, and not limiting at all like the last stage. So honestly an A tier for me. 5-1 is an ice stage with ice blocks that make you slip right off the platform, and insta-kill you without the ability to undo your actions, so literally 90% of the time you're just redoing the stage all over again and again. Isn't that amazing? I'm having so much fun! These ice stages make my blood boil so much, an immediate F tier. 5-2 is much better as it has more routes to go, allowing the player to move freely, which also allows for a replayability factor. The platforming feels much more refined and balanced overall, so A tier. 5-3 is another appearance of Kassadin with the addition of a wedding dress. I really like how many options the stage gives to the player. The ice blocks feel intentionally placed rather than to slow you down. Her attack patterns are quite simple in theory, however she has this one move where she can take away blocks and add blocks that are completely random, so most of the time, despite doing relatively well, you get stuck at random points, which is not fun at all. She can also knock you down from the platforms with her icy breath, and this feels balanced like it should. But just because of that attack, this has to go down to B tier. 6-1 is well balanced, while still having parts that are a bit difficult at first. It introduces a new block that explodes after a few seconds that turns the other blocks around it to crumbling ones. It has multiple routes, so A tier. The same can't be said for 6-2 as it's quite tedious. You're constantly forced to make a certain type of stairway, which completely destroys any creativity, and because there's bombs everywhere, if you don't time it correctly, you have to undo everything. It's also very confusing, F tier. 6-3 is slightly better as it feels more balanced, and allows for multiple ways to climb, but it still can be quite confusing at times, so a C tier. 6-4 is the boss stage with the cooler robot baby that's got a chainsaw as an arm. Although the platforming is simple with little innovation, the attacks make up for this as one of them launch chainsaw machines onto the block, which require precision and patience. And the other completely destroys paths, making our paths smaller each time. I genuinely had fun though, so our first S tier. 7-1 is so confusing. Either I'm dumb or I don't know, cause I had to look at guides so many times, and the rest of the time it was just a very limiting stage overall, as it forced you to climb a certain way and it didn't have any diversity either, an immediate F tier. 7-2, although challenging, can be quite fun to play, and it's pretty diverse, so B tier. 7-3 and 7-4 is only slightly better solely because it's much shorter, and has some diversity in it. But this is more like the calm before the storm, C tier. 7-5 is against Shadow of Vincent. It's pretty diverse with multiple paths, while again being very confusing. Although its attack is non-existent, which is underwhelming as you can imagine. This literally just feels and plays out like any other 7th stage, just platforming. It does have this bit where you go blind for a few seconds and have to either wait or plan ahead within those time frames, so a B tier at best, because it doesn't feel like a boss stage at all. The 8th stage is quite challenging solely because how slow Cassidy moves and how weak her AI is. Even though the puzzles are pretty simple, she dies so many times just because she couldn't catch up, or she went to the wrong direction and got stuck, even though the platform is right there to the side. As much as I love this in concept, the execution is really bad. B tier. 9-1 starts off relatively easy and gets harder as it goes on. It has multiple routes and is pretty fun overall, so an easy B tier. 9-2 is really confusing at times while still being enjoyable, but it's way too complicated for my taste, so C tier. 9-3 is like a breath of fresh air compared to the last stages, but again it's still quite difficult, B tier. 9-4, while it seems quite simple at first, becomes painstakingly complicated as it goes on. It's filled to the brim with bomb blocks, which gets super annoying super quickly, but thankfully it's relatively short, so C tier. 9-5 is the first phase of Thomas Midden, who has 3 attack patterns, changing the blocks around us by a tap of his gavel, kicking us with his shoe, and using his targeted gun multiple times that can also destroy blocks, which makes this attack the most annoying one, since if a staircase gets destroyed, you have to undo the whole thing and hope that it doesn't happen again and again, which it will! The fight definitely drags out, which makes it feel repetitive rather than engaging boss. The block changes are so random, and with the addition of destroying blocks, paths become completely unusable, forcing us to undo once more. 9-6 is surprisingly slightly more balanced and diverse overall, though this doesn't make it less obnoxious, but it's still interesting enough to be enjoyable at times, so honestly A tier. But genuinely, if it wasn't for his enjoyable character and funny line deliveries, I would have bawled my eyes out even more at his stages. Also, I'm starting to realize that despite this being a hard game, the stages are actually well designed that put the experiences of past stages to the test, making them all very engaging, since the platforms fall off the longer you take, making it so that you actively pay attention to your surroundings. One thing I will complain about, however, is that you can't change the camera angle around while the bosses do their special attack. Not only is this very frustrating, but it also slows you down as you can't see anything ahead. Okay, now that we've discussed everything, I have a little side tangent. Why the hell do the little scenes when entering the nightmares not have subtitles? I know a lot of people like to play in English, but we still exist! That's just disrespectful at that point. And that was Catherine. I genuinely hope you try the game out for yourselves if you're an Atlus fan. It's definitely got a different feeling compared to the other titles, but it's still an underrated gem, that's for sure.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe. That would help me so much. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye!